The letter arrived at Soviet headquarters on January 4, 1940. It was written in shaking handwriting by a lieutenant named Dmitry Volkov. The letter said something that should have been impossible. It said that an entire company, 140 men, had been sent into a 3-kilometer stretch of forest near the Kola River. Only 17 came back. The rest weren't killed by artillery. They weren't killed by machine gun nests. They were hunted, picked off, one by one, by something they never saw. The commanding officer who read this letter thought Volkov had lost his mind. He thought it was battle fatigue, shell shock, the cold breaking men's brains. He was wrong. What Volkov had witnessed was the beginning of the greatest hunting operation in military history. A systematic extermination carried out not by a special forces team, not by a company of elite soldiers, but by one man. A 33-year-old farmer who had just invented 7 techniques that would turn him into a ghost. This is the story of Simo Häyhä. But this isn't the story you've heard before. This isn't about kill counts or medals. This is about the 7 specific traps, 7 deliberate modifications to the art of warfare that allowed one human being to kill 505 soldiers in 100 days. 7 tricks so simple, so counterintuitive, that even today, military historians argue about whether they should be taught or whether they're too dangerous to become doctrine. To understand the 7 traps, you first have to understand the impossible situation that created them. November 30th, 1939. Joseph Stalin, leader of the largest military force on Earth, made a demand to his tiny neighbor Finland. Give us your land. Give us your islands. Give us your bases. Create a buffer zone between us and the coming German threat. Finland, a nation of 3.5 million people, refused. Stalin was not a man who accepted refusal. He launched an invasion that was supposed to last 2 weeks. The numbers were a mathematical certainty of Finnish defeat. The Red Army crossed the border with 1 million soldiers. Finland mobilized 300,000 men, mostly farmers and part-time militia. The Soviets brought 6,000 tanks. The Finns had 32. The Soviets commanded 3,000 aircraft. The Finns had 114. Every military analyst in the world predicted a Soviet victory in days. Time magazine wrote Finland's obituary before the first shot was fired. But Stalin and his generals had made the fatal mistake of looking at numbers on paper instead of looking at the land itself. They were invading in winter. Not just any winter. The winter of 1939 to 1940 would become one of the coldest in recorded Finnish history. Temperatures dropped to -40 degrees Celsius, and they were invading a country that was 70% dense forest, a landscape the Finns knew like the lines on their own hands. The Finns had a word for their national character: sisu. It doesn't translate perfectly, but it means something like stubborn courage mixed with cold determination, a refusal to yield, even when yielding is the only logical option. The Finnish military command, led by Marshal Carl Gustaf Emil Mannerheim, knew they couldn't win a conventional war. So they wouldn't fight one. They developed Matti tactics. The word means a cubic meter of firewood, a single log cut from a larger trunk. The Finns would let the massive Soviet columns crawl down the narrow forest roads. Then they would cut them off, chop them into smaller, isolated pockets, and let the cold do the killing. Finnish ski troops, dressed in pure white, would materialize from the trees, destroy supply lines, kill officers, and vanish back into the snow. This was the nightmare the Red Army walked into. And into this nightmare walked Simo Häyhä, a man so quiet, so unassuming, that his own commanding officer almost didn't accept him into the regiment because he looked too small, too gentle. He was 152 centimeters tall. He weighed about 60 kilograms. He looked like someone's grandfather. Not a soldier. He was about to become the deadliest individual combatant in human history, and he was going to do it with 7 tricks that broke every rule in the book. When Simo reported to the 34th Infantry Regiment at the Kolar River, he was issued a rifle, a Finnish M2830, a variant of the Russian Mosin Nagant. It was reliable. It was accurate. It had iron sights, simple black metal notches and posts. His commanding officer, Lieutenant Juho Uitola, looked at this small farmer and made an offer. He said, "Häyhä, you're going to be a sniper. We have new rifles with scopes. Soviet PE-4 scopes. 4-power magnification. You'll be able to see targets at 600 meters. Every sniper in every army on Earth wanted a scope. Scopes were the future. They magnified the enemy. They gave you precision. They gave you confidence." Simo Häyhä refused. This was trap number 1, the trap of refusal. To Lieutenant Uitola, it looked like madness. To the other soldiers, it looked like a farmer who didn't understand modern warfare. But Simo understood something that the military sniper schools had not yet learned. He understood the physics of cold. A scope has glass. Glass reflects light. In the low-angle winter sun of the Finnish Arctic, where the sun never rises above 15 degrees, that glass catches and reflects light like a mirror. A tiny flash, a glint visible from 400 meters away. In a landscape of pure white snow and dark trees, that glint is a death sentence. It's a signal flare that says, "I am here. I am watching you. Shoot me now." Iron sights are just black metal. They don't glint. They don't reflect. They're invisible. But that wasn't the only reason. A scope fogs. When you press your warm eye against cold glass in -40-degree weather, condensation forms instantly. The lens becomes opaque. You raise your rifle to shoot, and all you see is white. You have to wipe it, lower your rifle, wait for your body heat to dissipate, and try again. In those 5 seconds, your target has moved. Or worse, your target has seen you. And there was a third reason, the most important one. A scope forces you to raise your head higher off the ground. To get proper eye relief, to align your eye with the scope's ocular lens, a sniper must lift his head about 8 centimeters higher than a man using iron sights. 8 centimeters. In a flat, snow-covered field where the average snow depth is 30 centimeters, those 8 centimeters are the difference between being invisible and being a target. Simo kept his iron sights. His kill zone would be between 150 and 400 meters. He didn't need magnification. He had been shooting at moving targets his entire life, hunting foxes and hares on his family farm. He just needed reliability. He needed invisibility. Trap number 1 was complete. While Soviet snipers glinted and fogged and raised their heads, Simo would be a black hole in the snow. No light, no reflection, no signal. The second trap was even simpler, and it came from pure farmer's logic. Simo knew that when you fire a high-powered rifle, the muzzle blast kicks up everything in front of the barrel. Dust, snow, debris. In the winter, when you fire from a prone position in deep snow, that muzzle blast creates a visible poof of white powder. It's small, maybe half a meter in diameter, but to a trained counter-sniper scanning the horizon, it's a massive arrow pointing at your exact location. The Soviet counter-sniper doctrine, which Simo had learned about from captured manuals, specifically trained their men to look for this poof. They called it the white signal. When you saw the white signal, you immediately returned fire to that location. Simo's solution was to eliminate the signal entirely. Every morning, before dawn, he would move to his chosen position. He wouldn't just lie down and start shooting. He would spend between 1 and 2 hours preparing his nest. He would pack down the snow in front of his barrel, compressing it with his hands and his rifle stock. Then he would pour water from his canteen onto the packed snow and let it freeze in the -40-degree cold. What he created was a solid block of ice, about 50 centimeters long and 20 centimeters wide, positioned directly in front of his muzzle. When he fired, the muzzle blast would hit this ice block instead of loose snow. The ice absorbed the blast, the energy dissipated into the solid surface. There was no poof. There was no white signal. There was only silence and death. To a Soviet counter-sniper scanning the tree line, looking for that telltale puff of snow, Simo Häyhä was invisible. They would hear the crack of the rifle, faint and distant. But they wouldn't see where it came from. And in the chaos of a battlefield, with artillery falling and machine guns chattering, that distant crack could be coming from anywhere. Trap number 2 was complete. No muzzle signature, no white signal. Just death from nowhere. The third trap solved a problem that killed more snipers than enemy bullets. Human breath. At -40 degrees Celsius, when a human exhales, their breath instantly condenses in the air. It creates a visible cloud of vapor that hangs in the still winter air for several seconds. A sniper lying in wait, breathing from tension and cold, creates a constant stream of these clouds. They might as well be smoke signals. Soviet counter-snipers were specifically trained to look for breath clouds. In the Winter War, in the white landscape, these clouds were often the only way to spot a hidden enemy. They called them soul smoke, because when you saw them, you knew a living person was there. Simo's solution was so simple, it sounds like folklore, but it was documented by multiple witnesses and confirmed by his own testimony years later. He kept his mouth full of snow. Not a small amount. He would pack a ball of snow, about the size of a hen's egg, and hold it in his mouth under his tongue. As he breathed, the hot air from his lungs would pass through his mouth and be cooled by the snow before it exited his body. The physics are straightforward. Human breath is approximately 37 degrees Celsius. Ambient air at Kola was -40 degrees. That's a 77-degree differential. When hot meets cold, condensation forms. But if you cool the breath inside your mouth to near ambient temperature before it exits, there's no differential. There's no condensation. There's no visible cloud. Simo would lie in his position for hours, sometimes 6 or 7 hours without moving, with a ball of snow slowly melting in his mouth. The meltwater he would swallow or spit quietly into the snow. He would replace the snow periodically, always moving slowly, always invisible. To a Soviet soldier scanning the horizon for threats, looking for the telltale signs of a sniper, Simo Häyhä had no breath. He had no soul smoke. He was already dead. Or he was never alive. He was a ghost. Trap number 3 was complete. No breath clouds, no soul smoke, just death from the void. The fourth trap was about position selection, and it revealed Simo's understanding of human psychology. Most snipers look for elevated positions, high ground, a small hill, a ridge, the second floor of a building. The thinking is sound. Height gives you range. Height gives you a field of view. Height gives you options. Simo did the opposite. He always chose the lowest possible position. He would find a slight depression in the snow, a natural ditch, a spot where the land dipped down by just 30 or 40 centimeters. Then he would do something that seemed suicidal. He would bury himself. Using his hands and a small shovel, he would excavate a shallow trench in the snow, barely deep enough for his body. Then he would lie down in it and carefully, methodically, pull snow over himself. He would leave only his eyes, the top of his head, and the muzzle of his rifle exposed. The rest of him, his entire body, was under snow. The human eye is trained to look for shapes that break the horizon. A head, a shoulder, the outline of a person. When you scan a snowy landscape, you're looking for dark spots, vertical lines, anything that doesn't belong. Simo removed all of those markers. He became a white lump in a white field. Even from 50 meters away, even if you were looking directly at him, you wouldn't see him. Your eye would slide right past. But the genius of this trap wasn't just visual. It was thermal. Soviet forces had started experimenting with crude infrared detection equipment in early 1940. These devices couldn't see through snow. When Simo buried himself, he wasn't just invisible to the naked eye. He was invisible to technology. His body heat was trapped under 30 centimeters of insulating snow. And there was a psychological component. When a Soviet soldier scanned the horizon, his brain was looking for threats at eye level or above. Hills, trees, windows. The human mind doesn't expect death to come from below, from the ground itself. Simo understood this. He weaponized it. Trap number 4 was complete. Height is weakness. The ground is strength. Death comes from below. The 5th trap was pure psychological warfare, and it shows that Simo wasn't just a shooter. He was a hunter who understood his prey. He developed a pattern that would drive Soviet forces into paranoid madness. He would never fire twice from the same position. This sounds like basic sniper doctrine, but Simo took it further. He would fire once, achieve a kill, and then he would do something unexpected. He wouldn't retreat to a new position hundreds of meters away. He would ski directly toward the enemy lines and set up a new position closer than before. The Soviet tactical response to sniper fire was predictable. When a soldier was shot, the unit would immediately call in artillery or mortar fire on the suspected sniper position. They would blanket the area with shells, destroying everything within a 100-meter radius. This worked against normal snipers. Fire, retreat, survive. But Simo would fire his shot from position A, then immediately ski to position B, which was often between his original position and the Soviet lines. When the artillery came down on position A, he was already past it, closer to the enemy. When the barrage lifted and Soviet troops cautiously advanced, thinking the sniper was dead or had retreated, Simo would fire again from position B. From a place that shouldn't be possible, this violated every assumption Soviet soldiers had about how snipers operated. Snipers were supposed to be far away. They were supposed to retreat when discovered. They weren't supposed to move closer. The psychological impact was devastating. Soviet soldiers started to believe that there were multiple snipers, that there were dozens of white deaths. Intelligence reports from captured Soviet officers showed that they estimated there were at least 20 Finnish snipers operating in the Kola sector. There was one man using movement and timing to create the illusion of an army of ghosts. Trap number 5 was complete. Predictability is death. False retreat is life. Fear multiplied is victory. The 6th trap was about sound discipline, and it came from Simo's life as a hunter. When you hunt moose in the Finnish forest, you learn that sound carries differently in extreme cold. At -40 degrees, the air is denser. Sound waves travel farther and clearer than they do in warm weather. A branch, snapping half a kilometer away, sounds like it's right next to you. Simo knew this. Soviet soldiers did not. They were mostly from Ukraine, Belarus, and Western Russia. They had never experienced this kind of cold. They didn't understand how sound worked here. They would whisper to each other from 50 meters away and think they were being quiet. Simo could hear every word. But Simo understood the inverse was also true. His own rifle shot, which would normally echo and reveal his position, could be masked. He would wait for moments of maximum noise to take his shots. Artillery falling, A machine gun burst, a truck engine starting, an aircraft flying overhead. In those moments, he would fire. The crack of his M2830 would be swallowed by the larger sound. But the most brilliant part of Trap 6 was what he did in silence. He learned to identify Soviet officers by their voices. He would lie in his position and listen. Officers spoke with more authority. They gave orders. They used different vocabulary. Simo couldn't speak Russian fluently, but he could identify tone and cadence. When he heard an officer's voice, he would wait. He would listen to where that voice was coming from, track its movement, and then strike. He killed more Soviet officers than any other single Finnish soldier. Not just because he could shoot, but because he could listen. He turned sound into a targeting system. Trap number 6 was complete. Silence is information. Sound is a weapon. Listening is hunting. The 7th trap was the most counterintuitive and the most dangerous. It was about rest and recovery, and it showed that Simo understood something most soldiers don't. You can't hunt for 24 hours straight. You can't maintain perfect tension forever. The mind breaks. The body fails. You make mistakes. Most snipers in the Winter War would go out for 1 or 2 days, achieve a few kills, then rotate back to rest. The doctrine said snipers needed 3 days of rest for every day in the field. Simo ignored this. He went out every single day for 100 days straight, but he never hunted for more than 8 hours. He would wake at 4 in the morning. He would prepare his equipment, eat his simple breakfast of dark bread and sugar, and ski to his position. He would build his ice block, fill his mouth with snow, and bury himself. He would hunt from dawn until 2 in the afternoon. Then, no matter what was happening, no matter how many targets were available, he would retreat. He would ski back to his lines, report his kills to Lieutenant Uatola, eat a hot meal, and sleep. This discipline, this self-imposed limit, kept him sharp. While other soldiers were exhausted, making mistakes, losing focus, Simo was consistent. His accuracy never wavered. His judgment never faltered. He treated hunting Soviets like he treated hunting moose on his farm. You hunt in the morning when the prey is active. You rest in the afternoon. You prepare for the next day. You don't burn yourself out. But Trap 7 had a darker component. By maintaining this routine, by appearing every single morning in roughly the same sector, Simo trained the Soviet forces to expect him. They knew he was coming. They would send counter-sniper teams, artillery barrages, special hunting platoons. They would throw everything they had at him. And this was exactly what Simo wanted. Because every Soviet soldier hunting for him was a Soviet soldier not attacking Finnish positions. Every artillery shell fired at the forest, looking for one man, was a shell not fired at Finnish trenches. Every hour Soviet commanders spent obsessing over the White Death was an hour they weren't planning effective attacks. Simo Häyhä had turned himself into bait, the most dangerous, most effective bait in military history. He had become a strategic weapon, simply by being predictable enough to draw attention, but too effective to be killed. Trap 7 was complete. Routine is strength. Predictability is strategy. One man can hold a line. Between December 1st, 1939, and March 6th, 1940, Simo Häyhä killed 505 Soviet soldiers with his rifle. This is confirmed by multiple sources, verified by his commanding officers, and documented in Finnish military records. That's an average of 5 kills per day for 100 days. But those numbers don't tell the real story. The real story is in what those 7 traps accomplished beyond the direct kills. Soviet intelligence reports, declassified in the 1990s, revealed that the entire Kola sector was classified as a critical morale threat zone. Soldiers refused to patrol there. Officers requested transfers. Entire companies reported sick rather than be sent to the White Death's hunting ground. The Kola River front, which should have been overrun in the first week of the war, held for the entire 3.5 months. The Finns were outnumbered 4-1. They had almost no artillery, no tanks, no air support. They held because of Matti tactics, because of Sisu, and because one man with 7 simple tricks had convinced an entire Soviet army that the forest itself was hunting them. March 6, 1940. Day 100. The war was almost over. Peace negotiations were underway. The Soviets were launching one final massive assault, trying to break through before the treaty was signed. Simo was in his position, doing what he had done every day for 3 months. He was hunting. The Soviets had finally brought in their heavy weapons. Not artillery, not mortars. They brought in specialized anti-sniper teams, equipped with explosive rounds. These rounds, roughly 12 millimeters in diameter, were designed to explode on impact. They were used against light vehicles and bunkers. A Soviet counter-sniper, name unknown, position unknown, fired a single explosive round in Simo's general direction. It was likely a random shot, one of thousands fired that day. It hit Simo directly in the face. The round entered his left cheek and exploded inside his mouth. His jaw shattered. His teeth were destroyed. Half of his face was simply gone. He fell unconscious, bleeding into the snow. His fellow soldiers found him an hour later and assumed he was dead. They carried his body to the rear and placed him with the other fallen. But Simo Häyhä, the man who had killed 505 enemies, who had held a line against an empire, wasn't done. 7 days later, he woke up. The war ended on March 13th, while Simo was still unconscious. He missed the peace treaty. He missed the victory celebrations. He spent the next 14 months in hospital, undergoing 26 reconstructive surgeries. Doctors rebuilt his face using bone from his hip and skin from his thigh. When he finally looked in a mirror, the White Death was gone. The left side of his face was scar tissue and surgical reconstruction, but he was alive. Trap 7 had saved him one final time. If he had stayed in the field for 12 hours instead of 8, if he had been exhausted instead of sharp, if he hadn't maintained his discipline, that explosive round would have found him hours earlier in a different position, and he wouldn't have survived the wound. The Finnish government made Simo Häyhä a national hero. Marshal Mannerheim personally promoted him from corporal to second lieutenant, the fastest battlefield promotion in Finnish history. He was awarded the Cross of Kola. His name was in every newspaper. His face, or what remained of it, was on propaganda posters. Simo hated all of it. He wanted to go home. When the war continued in 1941, the continuation war against the Soviet Union, he tried to rejoin his unit. He was refused. His injuries were too severe. His face couldn't withstand the cold anymore. The scar tissue would freeze and crack. So, he went back to farming. The Soviet Union had taken his original home in the territorial concessions, so he was given a new farm in Ruokolahti. He bred hunting dogs. He became a successful moose hunter. He lived quietly for the next 60 years. He rarely spoke about the war. When journalists found him in the 1980s and 1990s asking about his tactics, about the 7 traps, about how he became death itself, he would give short, simple answers. When asked if he felt remorse for killing over 500 men, he said, "I did what I was told to do as well as I could." When asked the secret to his success, he gave a one-word answer: practice. Simo Häyhä died in April 2002 at the age of 96. He remains the deadliest sniper in recorded military history. But his real legacy isn't the kill count. It's the 7 traps. Modern military sniper schools now teach modified versions of his techniques. The refusal of over-reliance on scopes, the understanding of muzzle signature, the importance of thermal discipline, the psychology of sound, the strategic value of routine. These weren't in any manual before Simo. They were farm logic, hunter's wisdom, applied to industrial warfare. But some military historians argue that the 7 traps should never have been documented, that they're too effective, too dangerous to become common knowledge. Because what Simo proved was that one individual, using nothing but observation and logic, could bring an entire army to a standstill. Not through technology, not through superior firepower, through understanding. He understood the physics of cold. He understood human psychology. He understood that visibility is death, and invisibility is power. He understood that the best weapon isn't the one that kills the most people. It's the one that makes the enemy afraid to move. The 7 traps turned one farmer into a ghost. They turned one rifle into an army. They turned 100 days into a legend that has lasted 85 years. Simo Häyhä never wanted to be famous. He never wanted to be the White Death. He just wanted to protect his home. And he did it with 7 simple tricks that any of us could learn, but few of us would have the sisu to employ. That's the real miracle. Not that he killed 505 men, but that he saw solutions where experts saw only doctrine. That he trusted his own logic over the manuals. That he understood war is ultimately about one mind against another, and the mind that sees clearest wins. The snow has melted. The forests of Kola are peaceful now. The battlefields are covered with moss and new trees. But the lesson remains, written in the snow, waiting for anyone willing to see it. 7 traps, 7 techniques, 7 ways to turn a man into a ghost. Practice, Simo said. Just practice. But what he really meant was, think. Observe. Trust your own eyes. Don't accept what you're told. Find the truth in the cold. And when you find it, use it without hesitation. That's how one farmer killed 505 Soviet soldiers in 100 days. Not with 7 complicated tactics, but with 7 simple truths that everyone had forgotten to see.